Welcome, traveler of the stars. You've arrived at the infinite scientist, where science dreams in the language of the cosmos. Tonight, we drift into the heart of the living world, where roots murmur beneath the soil and leaves hum in their sleep. If you find beauty in the mysteries of nature, let your curiosity rest here. Subscribe and dream with us beneath the stars. The forest does not sleep. Even when night descends and the last bird folds its wings, the woods remain alive in whispers too soft for human ears. Beneath the quiet canopy, a vast and ancient conversation continues, one that has carried on for millions of years. Trees reach through the dark with invisible hands, roots brushing roots, exchanging secrets through the soil. If one could listen closely enough, the ground itself would be humming, a soft pulse, a slow heartbeat shared by all living things. Every tree, every blade of grass, every fern and fungus is part of this endless communion. The air may seem still, but deep below, chemical messages move like letters passed between friends. One tree tells another of drought, another warns of insects, another simply breathes a word of comfort. This is no imagination of poets. Science has heard the murmurs too. For decades, biologists and ecologists have uncovered what the forest already knew. Life listens. In the damp silence beneath your feet lies a network older than humankind, a lattice of fungal threads so fine they could wrap around the planet like silk. The mycorrhizal network, scientists call it. To the forest, it is something far greater. A living web of exchange, a biological internet connecting roots, transferring water, nutrients, even messages of distress. Through these threads, a tree can nourish its offspring, warn a neighbor, or share its final strength before dying. When one tree falls, its memory lingers in others through the shared pulse of the soil. We often imagine plants as quiet, still, detached from the pulse of awareness. Yet here, in the forest that never sleeps, awareness wears many forms. A wounded leaf releases invisible scents that drift through the air, carrying warning signals to others. Within minutes, neighboring plants change their chemistry, arming themselves against the same danger. It is not thought as we know it, nor speech as we use it, but it is communication, undeniably, beautifully real. At dawn, sunlight begins to sift through the canopy, and the conversation shifts. Leaves open like eyes awakening, exchanging invisible gases with the air, exhaling oxygen, inhaling carbon dioxide, weaving breath into the rhythm of the planet. The forest breathes for all of us, yet it also listens to its own music, the rustle of insects, the vibration of raindrops, the faint tremor of wind moving through bark. Every vibration carries information. Every scent, every molecule, every flicker of light exchanged between leaves is part of this silent language of life. Some scientists now believe that trees exhibit a kind of memory, not the memory of words or images, but of conditions, seasons, and pain. When a drought ends, roots remember how to find water faster the next time. When attacked, a tree strengthens its defenses sooner than before. This memory, passed along roots and soil, is shared across generations. It is as though the forest learns, not individually, but collectively, through time itself. Stand within such a forest, and you can feel it, the subtle hum of existence, the sense that you are standing not among individuals, but within one vast living being. The air feels different, charged with quiet purpose. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of listening. The forest is aware, not in the way a human is aware of thought, but in the way the earth is aware of balance. To walk among trees is to step inside a memory that predates language. It is to feel, if only for a moment, that life has been speaking all along and we have only just learned how to hear. Scientists measure, record and map these hidden communications, Yet what they uncover always feels like rediscovery, as though ancient wisdom has simply waited beneath our feet for us to remember. The forest that never sleeps is not merely a collection of trees. It is a mind made of roots, rain, and time. It grows, learns, and heals in silence. And perhaps that silence is the truest form of wisdom. Not an absence of sound, but an abundance of meaning too deep for words. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine lying at the heart of that forest. Around you, roots whisper, leaves sigh softly, and the earth breathes in rhythm with your pulse. You are part of this network too, born of the same carbon, fed by the same light, dreaming within the same endless conversation. The forest does not sleep. It simply closes its eyes and listens. Beneath the quiet moss and fallen leaves, where sunlight never reaches, an unseen world stretches endlessly through the dark. The roots of ancient trees move like slow rivers, weaving between stones, touching one another in silence. Down here, there is no wind, no birdsong, only the soft pulse of life, exchanging messages in the language of molecules and minerals. If you listen with your imagination, you can almost hear it, a whisper that feels more like breathing than speech. Each root carries its own story, but none exist alone. Beneath the soil, they intertwine with filaments of fungi so delicate they can slip through a single grain of sand. Together, they form what scientists call the wood wide web, a hidden network where plants and fungi live in a kind of quiet partnership. The fungi extend the tree's reach, helping them drink from deeper wells of water and absorb distant minerals. In return, the trees share the sugars they spin from sunlight. It is an ancient exchange, older than forests themselves, a pact written in chemistry instead of words. Through this network, trees speak, not in sound but in pulses, in shifts of nutrients and signals carried by microscopic messengers. When one tree grows weak or thirsty, others may sense it through the flow of carbon beneath the ground. Stronger trees often send help, feeding the struggling one as though kindness were part of nature's code. Scientists have seen this happen in both lab and wilderness, the old mother trees nourishing saplings that might never have survived alone. It feels almost human, this giving and receiving. Yet the forest does not act from emotion. It acts from harmony. Each root seeks balance. The whisper beneath the roots is not of pity or love, but of connection, a recognition that survival is shared. In the dark, unseen and uncelebrated, the trees know that one cannot live well unless all can live. If you could see this network glowing beneath the earth, it would look like a galaxy made of threads, luminous and infinite. Every root tip like a star, every fungal line a bridge of light connecting worlds. And just like the cosmos above, it operates in silence. There is no noise here, only movement, vibration, and pulse. Life passing messages as if time itself were made of whispers. When drought comes, the messages change. A struggling tree releases a faint signal, and its neighbors begin to tighten their water flow, conserving what little remains. When insects attack, roots warn one another, prompting distant trees to alter their chemistry, to produce bitter compounds that repel the invaders. It's a quiet alarm system woven into the soil, a network of survival that hums beneath our feet every moment of every day. And yet, despite all this hidden activity, we walk across the earth as though it were still. We rarely imagine the dense communication happening inches below our souls. The world we see above is only half the story. The real conversation of life happens underground. Here, death feeds life, decay becomes language, and silence holds more meaning than sound ever could. There is beauty in this hidden humility, in knowing that nature does not shout to be heard. It simply connects. The roots do not compete for attention. They collaborate, They do not boast of giving, they simply give. And perhaps, somewhere within that stillness, there is a lesson for us. That true strength may not lie in standing tall, but in reaching quietly toward others, unseen. Scientists once believed that trees competed for sunlight and space, but now we know that they also share water, carbon, nitrogen, and even wisdom written in molecular code. The network beneath our feet acts as both memory and messenger. Through it, forests remember droughts, floods, and fires. They adapt and teach each new generation of roots to endure what came before. It is as if the earth itself keeps notes in secret ink, written in the language of life. Imagine placing your hand upon the soil and feeling that slow pulse. You would not hear words, but perhaps you would sense meaning. The same kind of meaning that stars feel when gravity binds them, or rivers feel when they find the sea. A quiet purpose that needs no voice. Night deepens. Above, the forest stands still, but below, the roots continue their endless exchange. Nutrients drift like glowing embers through the fungal threads. Energy moves from the dying to the living, from the strong to the small. Even death here is a form of generosity. A final whisper beneath the roots that says, "Continue." When morning returns, you might walk through that same forest unaware of the conversations happening below. But the soil remembers. Every footstep, every fallen leaf becomes part of a language far older than us. The roots continue to whisper, sharing what they've learned, preparing for what's to come. And as they do, the forest breathes not only for itself, but for the world. In the soft light of dawn, the forest seems to hold its breath. Dew gathers on the edges of countless leaves, trembling like tiny mirrors that catch the rising sun. The air is still, and yet something unspoken passes between the trees, an invisible language whispered through the trembling green. You can almost sense it, the way each leaf turns ever so slightly toward its neighbor, as though listening. Leaves, though delicate and thin, are not silent. They are alive with intention. Beneath their emerald skin lies a complex network of cells and veins. Highways where light becomes life. But more than that, leaves are messengers. They speak in scents, in chemical signals carried by the breeze, in vibrations felt across canopies. What we mistake for stillness is in fact a quiet dialogue written in light and air. When sunlight first touches a leaf, it begins to hum. Not with sound, but with energy. Photons collide with chlorophyll, and the great transformation begins. In that invisible alchemy, light becomes sugar, and sugar becomes strength. The leaf keeps some for itself and sends the rest down into the roots, a gift to the whole tree. Yet this gift also carries information, a subtle code that tells the roots how much light the world above is giving, whether the weather is kind or cruel. In this way, each leaf is both eye and tongue, seeing the sky, feeling the sun, and sharing what it learns with the rest of the forest. When one tree struggles, its leaves dim. When many trees sense danger, their leaves release tiny molecules into the air, distress signals that other plants read like warnings in the wind. A damaged oak, for example, will emit chemicals that drift through the forest, alerting others to thicken their defenses. Within minutes, miles of green begin to prepare. Science calls this volatile organic communication. But the forest calls it survival. Every breath of the wind carries more than air. It carries messages. One tree's sigh becomes another's awakening. Even the rustle of leaves is part of this living grammar. Vibrations traveling from branch to branch, each wave telling a different story. Some studies have found that plants can sense the specific frequencies made by a caterpillar chewing on a leaf. Without any eyes or ears, the plant still knows, and begins to defend itself before the damage grows. This is language without words, emotion without thought, a kind of intelligence that moves slower than ours but perhaps deeper. For while humans fill the world with noise, The forest listens, responds, and adapts. It doesn't argue or forget. It simply remembers in the language of molecules and motion. When a storm gathers, leaves turn their faces down, as though bowing to what's inevitable. They fold, curl, and whisper to each other through changes in moisture and pressure. Each movement sends signals through their stems down into the heart of the tree. The roots receive the message, prepare, hold steady. The rain is coming, and when the first drops fall, they play a music only nature understands, a slow rhythm on a million tiny drums. Each droplet carries traces of air and minerals which the leaves taste and interpret. The rain's chemistry tells them about distant places or the sea, the mountains, the city far away. In this way, a single storm becomes a traveler's tale, told leaf to leaf across the forest. But perhaps the most mysterious part of the language of leaves is how it speaks to us, even when we don't realize it. The soft rustle in the breeze calms our minds, slows our breath, and lowers the rhythm of our hearts. It is as if the leaves remember what we've forgotten: how to be still, how to breathe in harmony with the world. Every human who has ever stood beneath a tree has felt this without understanding it. The whisper of the canopy above carries an ancient comfort, older than words, deeper than reason. It's the same peace that filled the lungs of our ancestors when they took shelter beneath the same branches, long before cities and screens divided us from the living world. Leaves are the lungs of the planet, but they are also its poets. Each one translates sunlight into existence and wind into song. When they tremble, they are not afraid. They are speaking endlessly to the sky, to the air, and to one another. Even in autumn, when they fade and fall, their message does not end. As they drift to the forest floor, they continue to give, turning into food for roots, for worms, for the unseen kingdom below. The leaf's final act is to become a word in another sentence of the forest's eternal story. Nothing is wasted. Even decay is dialogue, and so the language of leaves continues, whispered from season to season, born in spring, sung in summer, remembered in fall, and dreamt through the long quiet of winter. It is a circular story, written in the color green, that never truly ends. When you next walk beneath a tree and feel the soft brush of air against your skin, know that you are not alone. You are part of the same breath that moves through the forest, part of the same language that began long before us and will continue long after. The leaves shimmer gently as if in agreement, and the forest falls back into stillness, listening again to its own quiet speech. There is a silence in the forest that isn't empty. It hums faintly, a low vibration that threads through bark and soil, reaching from one ancient root to another. To stand among trees is to stand inside a slow and endless conversation, one that happens not in sound but in pulses of life. The forest speaks, though not in any language humans know. Its voice travels through the ground, through water, through the fibers of things that remember how to listen. Deep below, where the light cannot follow, the true conversations begin. Every root tip, like a fingertip of the earth, stretches through the dark in search of contact. When one root meets another, they touch softly, exchanging not words but signals, chemicals, hormones, electric whispers. Through these connections, the forest builds a hidden web of awareness. A single tree might be joined to hundreds of others, and all of them to thousands more. It's a network without borders, older than thought itself. This is the secret voice of the trees, invisible to us but constant. Scientists have begun to map its vastness, discovering that forests are not collections of individuals, but living communities, families bound by shared breath and memory. Some trees act as elders, deep-rooted and wise, sending nutrients and warnings to the younger saplings through intricate root pathways. Others serve as bridges linking distant clusters together so the entire forest can feel as one. If you could listen with the patience of stone, you might hear it, the long, slow pulse of exchange beneath your feet. It would sound less like talking and more like breathing. A rhythm of give and take, of nourishment and need. Trees feed one another not out of charity, but out of recognition. What happens to one happens to all. When lightning splits a trunk, when drought starves a patch of soil, the echoes spread underground. Signals race outward, carried by filaments of fungi and rivers of water. The forest responds, adjusting, compensating, mourning in silence. The hidden voice doesn't rise to the surface easily. It moves too slowly for ears attuned to speech and song. But some moments, rare, sacred, allow it to break through. The creak of an old oak in the wind, the groan of roots shifting after rain, the faint hiss of sap rising in spring. These are fragments of that secret dialogue made audible. The forest dreaming out loud. For centuries, people believed trees were mute. Only in recent decades did we begin to hear their subtler tones. Sensors placed on trunks reveal faint electric currents that fluctuate as the environment changes. Tiny pulses of voltage travel through the xylem, the inner channels that carry water, like heartbeats echoing through veins. When drought looms, these signals grow restless, urging leaves to close their pores and conserve what's left. When sunlight returns, the pulse calms again. It's not a mind as we know it, but it is a kind of intelligence. The forest is not thinking, it is feeling. Each shift in the wind, each change in temperature ripples across its hidden network. The response is not emotional, but it is alive. It adapts, remembers, and sometimes even predicts. In a sense, the trees are always whispering about tomorrow. Yet what makes this hidden voice truly haunting is its age. Some trees still standing today began their conversations before the first human stories were told. Imagine the slow passing of messages across generations of trees, from root to root, century after century. The oak on one hill might be the descendant of another that once shared soil with mammoths. Through shared fungal threads, it might still carry faint echoes of that ancient ground. Memory doesn't need a brain when it's written into the land itself. The fungi, the mycelial bridges that lace the soil, are the translators of this language. They form vast underground networks connecting species that would otherwise stand alone. Through them, trees trade not only resources but warnings. When an insect infestation strikes one region, others far away begin to prepare. When a tree falls, its nutrients are redistributed, its story absorbed into the collective. Death in the forest is never silence. It is merely a change in tone. To walk in a forest, then, is to walk through layers of unspoken history. Beneath every step, beneath every root, old voices murmur like faint waves in the dark. They remember droughts, floods, fires, winters, the touch of every creature that has ever passed through. The soil itself is alive with recollection, carrying the memories of 1,000,000 lives. Perhaps that's why the forest feels sacred, even to those who cannot explain why. We sense the presence of something vast and aware, something that listens back. The air feels thicker here, as if filled with invisible attention. The trees stand still, but their stillness hums. A stillness that contains both age and intention. When night falls, the forest doesn't sleep. Sap continues to rise and fall. Roots continue to reach and touch. Signals continue to pass in quiet persistence. The hidden voice becomes the only sound that truly matters. Soft, continuous, eternal. And in this darkness, under the deep hum of life, there is a lesson. Communication does not need words. Connection does not need noise. The most profound conversations in the universe might be the ones that no one hears. Above, the stars glitter faintly through the branches. Below, roots entwine like the veins of the planet. Between them stands the quiet witness of all, the tree, speaking endlessly in the voice only the earth can understand. The forest exhales, and the night listens. The hidden voice fades back into the soil, where it has always lived, patient, ancient, and waiting for dawn. The wind drifts through the forest like a soft messenger, touching each leaf with invisible fingers. It gathers scents, spores, whispers, the hidden speech of living things, and carries them across valleys and rivers, from mountain ridges to the edges of deserts. To the untrained senses, it is only air, shifting and sighing, but to the trees it is a living archive of messages. Every breeze brings news of danger, of distance, of rain, of return. High in the canopy, the oldest branches listen. They know the difference between the breath of a storm and the breath of a neighboring tree. The forest, through its leaves, sends its thoughts into the air. When an acacia is bitten by a grazing animal, it releases an alarm, ethylene gas, invisible but potent, and nearby trees, sensing it, change the chemistry of their leaves to taste bitter and unappealing. The message moves faster than footsteps, spreading on the wind. The herd moves on, and the trees once again fall into silence. It's strange to think that the air itself can carry a language, a vocabulary of scents and molecules. When a maple or poplar is injured, it exhales a plume of distress, a cloud of complex organic compounds that say, "I am hurt." Nearby plants inhale these invisible words and begin to prepare, strengthening their defenses before harm ever reaches them. The air between them becomes a bridge, a passage of warning. What seems like stillness to us is a constant exchange of meaning. The science behind this quiet correspondence is now unfolding like the leaves themselves. Plants release hundreds of volatile compounds, each with a story to tell, a cry for help, a signal of readiness, a whisper of attraction. These signals can travel far beyond sight, drifting through the air like soft notes in a melody too delicate for human ears. Even when no breeze stirs, the molecules diffuse and linger, spreading like thoughts that refuse to fade. Pollinators are fluent in this aerial language. Bees, moths, and butterflies follow trails of scent that guide them to blossoms, each flower composing its own chemical song to summon the right visitor. Some plants change their fragrance as daylight fades, calling only to the creatures of the night. Others alter their scent when they've already been pollinated, closing the chapter of desire and moving on to the story of fruit. Every shift in the air is a sentence written in molecules, a story woven in the unseen currents. But the most haunting messages are the ones sent not in invitation, but in defense. When the caterpillars arrive, a leaf shivers slightly and releases its warning. The wind carries the signal to its neighbors, and those neighbors respond in unison, releasing their own chemicals that summon predators of the caterpillars. The air becomes alive with strategy. It is not war exactly, but an act of balance, a response from life to life. The forest breathes not only for itself, but for all that depends on its breath. If you stand among the trees long enough, something subtle begins to happen. You start to feel that the air isn't empty at all. It is thick with intention. It holds the taste of pine resin, the cool sweetness of moss, the faint bitterness of bark. These are the signatures of life, mixed and drifting. The forest isn't a collection of separate beings, but a shared respiration, a single long exhale from the lungs of the planet. And beyond the forest, the message spreads. Across grasslands, across gardens, even across oceans, the same principle moves through every leaf and petal. The wind that begins in a cedar grove might carry pollen to a distant meadow, or dust from one continent to another. Within that dust are fragments of seeds, bits of bacteria, the microscopic fingerprints of life's persistence. The planet's air is a vast and silent messenger, connecting ecosystems that have never seen each other. Perhaps this is the truest form of conversation, not bound by sound, but by exchange. The air that passes through your lungs may once have drifted through the canopy of an ancient forest. You are part of the same dialogue, made of the same breath that feeds the trees. When you exhale, you give something back. A message in carbon and warmth, a soft reply in the endless communication of life. It makes one wonder what the earth says to itself in these constant exchanges. Maybe it dreams through them in the slow inhalation and exhalation of everything alive. Maybe the wind is the earth's heartbeat, pulsing softly against our skin, reminding us that every breath we take is borrowed from something older, vaster and wiser than we can imagine. When storms rise, they carry more than rain and thunder. They bring with them the stories of countless forests, deserts, and oceans. Raindrops fall as messengers too, each one holding the faint chemical memory of the sky's last meeting with the earth. And when the storm clears, the air tastes different, as if the world has spoken and is waiting for you to listen. Even in the quietest night, the messages never stop. Somewhere, a fern releases its scent into the cool dark, a moss exhales moisture, a flower closes and dreams of the next dawn. The wind moves softly through it all, carrying those tiny secrets onward. It is the planet's endless lullaby, one that no creature escapes, and all belong to. So when you stand beneath the whispering branches and feel the wind move through your hair, remember that it is not merely weather. It is memory, intention, and life in motion. You are standing in the center of a vast conversation that began long before you, one that will continue long after you sleep. The wind sighs again, and the forest listens. In that endless dialogue between air and leaf, the world tells its story, slow, unbroken, and beautifully alive. Beneath your feet lies another world, older than the forest above it, more alive than the air we breathe. It is a world without sunlight, without sound, and yet it hums with quiet purpose. Each inch of soil is a universe in miniature, dense with roots, fungi, bacteria, and unseen threads of connection. The ground is not dead matter. It is the living skin of the planet, and every handful of it contains more life than there are stars in the sky above. The soil breathes. It expands and contracts with moisture, with heat, with the turning of seasons. When the rain falls, it drinks deeply, releasing the scent that reminds us of renewal. Petrichor, the fragrance of life waking up. To most, it's just the smell of wet earth. But to the trees, it's a signal, a promise that the cycle continues. Within moments of the first raindrop, 1,000,000 microorganisms begin their dance of transformation, breaking down the old and feeding the new. This hidden world is where the true heart of the forest beats. Roots twist through the dark like slow lightning, reaching toward each other in patient curiosity. They don't just grow, or they listen. Around them, fine filaments of fungi weave a delicate lace, binding everything together. These fungal networks, the mycorrhizae, form an underground web through which trees exchange nutrients and information. Scientists once thought roots were solitary, competing for space and water. But beneath the soil, competition gives way to cooperation. One tree's excess becomes another's salvation. Imagine a great oak, standing tall in the clearing. Its roots stretch deep into the earth where they meet the roots of younger saplings. Through their fungal allies, they send slow pulses of sugar and minerals, a form of nourishment that feels like love made tangible. The older trees, their canopies wide, capture sunlight and convert it into food. The younger ones, shaded beneath them, receive that food through the soil, the forest ensuring that no life is left behind. This quiet generosity continues even after death. When a tree falls, its remains become nourishment for the living. Fungi, worms, and bacteria break it down, releasing its stored energy back into the soil. The nutrients don't vanish, they are redistributed, reborn. The fallen tree becomes part of the roots it once fed, part of the flowers that bloom where it stood. Death here isn't an ending. It's a soft transition into another form of connection. If you were to place your ear to the forest floor, you might imagine you could hear it. The soft clicking of roots expanding, the microscopic murmurs of life rearranging itself. In truth, it's a silence so deep it becomes sacred. Within that silence, signals travel. A root under attack from parasites releases chemical warnings, carried swiftly through the fungal threads to its neighbors. The soil becomes an information network, a living internet, linking species across vast distances. Every handful of soil contains the ghosts of former forests, decomposed leaves, fallen seeds, ancient pollen grains. These remnants hold the memory of what the earth once was, shaping what it will become. When a new forest grows in the same place, it does not start from nothing. It inherits the wisdom of what has already lived there. The soil remembers, and the fungi, those patient architects of decay and renewal, serve as both translators and guardians of that memory. Their threads wrap around roots and stones, sensing, reacting, adapting. They feed the plants, and in return, the plants feed them sugars made from sunlight. It is a partnership older than time, a conversation that sustains all life on land. Without these hidden relationships, the forests would wither, the crops would fail, and the planet's breath would falter. Yet it is not only trees that rely on this network. Tiny seedlings, mosses, and ferns all join the same silent communion. Even the smallest grass knows the touch of the mycelium, the whisper of the soil's heartbeat. In this unseen web, all boundaries blur. Predator and prey, birth and death, giver and taker. The soil is where separateness dissolves. To humans, this world is invisible. We walk across it, build upon it, rarely noticing the life beneath. But our own survival is tethered to it, as surely as a leaf is tethered to its stem. The food we eat, the air we breathe, the water that nourishes us, all pass through the patient hands of soil. It is both womb and grave, keeper of beginnings and ends. The soil's inhabitants, the microbes and worms and fungi, do not rest. Every second they are at work breaking down the fallen, recycling the forgotten. Through them the earth cleanses itself. What dies above becomes life below. The quiet equilibrium continues, endless and merciful. The forest, in its stillness, is never idle. It is always in the act of renewal. And there, in the cool depths, lies the essence of nature's resilience. It doesn't resist decay, it turns decay into creation. It doesn't flee from endings, it transforms them into new songs of growth. The soil teaches a truth that human hearts often forget, that nothing truly ends and nothing truly stands alone. When you walk barefoot through the forest, you join that cycle. The ground yields slightly under your weight, receiving you without judgment. Beneath your skin, your own cells respond more. Your heartbeat slows, your breath deepens. For a brief moment, you are part of the great respiration of the planet. You are touching not just dirt, but the shared memory of everything that has ever lived. Night descends, and the forest above falls quiet. But under the surface, the work continues, roots exchanging, fungi feeding, the soil breathing softly in the dark. It is a world without eyes, yet full of vision. A realm without voices, yet full of communication. The secret life beneath the soil carries on, unseen but eternal, a reminder that even in darkness, life never stops whispering to itself. If the forest were a body, then the mycelium would be its nervous system, a vast web of awareness threading through the dark soil, carrying signals, sharing sustenance, and linking all living things into one sentient whole. It stretches unseen beneath your feet, finer than hair, older than trees, connecting root to root in a silent conversation that never ends. This is not imagination. It is science, and yet it feels like poetry. The mycelium moves information the way neurons pass thought. When one part of the forest suffers, others sense it. When one tree thrives, others benefit. What seems like chaos in the soil is, in truth, a great network of order, intelligence, and compassion. Each filament of the mycelium is called a hypha, delicate, translucent, and endlessly branching. Millions of them intertwine, forming a network that can stretch for miles, invisible to the naked eye. Together, they weave a tapestry so complex that even modern science struggles to map it. This network links not just trees of the same kind, but different species, oaks and pines, birches and ferns, all sharing through the fungal web. Imagine standing in the heart of an ancient forest. Above you, the canopy sways with wind and sunlight. Beneath you, an invisible mind listens. When a tree sends a chemical cry for help, perhaps from drought or an insect's bite, the mycelium receives it instantly. Within moments, neighboring trees adjust, closing their pores to conserve water, changing their chemistry to repel danger. It is a form of empathy written not in emotion, but in molecules. This communication doesn't happen in human seconds. It's slower, deeper, like thought in slow motion. Yet it works flawlessly, tirelessly. The mycelium is patient. It never rushes. It simply connects, sustains, and adapts. It is life's quiet intelligence at work. Some scientists call it the wood wide web, but that phrase feels almost too small. It's more than an exchange of data. It's a communion, a consciousness that has no single center, but exists everywhere at once. The forest doesn't think the way we do, yet it reacts, remembers, and learns. Through the mycelium, trees feed each other sugar and nitrogen, just as blood carries nutrients between cells. A mother tree, old, towering, and wise, may sense her seedlings struggling in the shadows. Through her roots and fungal partners, she sends them nourishment. She gives without seeing. She shares without knowing. And through that act, the forest thrives as one. But the mycelium mind is not just about generosity. It is also about balance. When invaders arrive, harmful fungi, parasitic plants, or invasive roots, the network isolates them, severing contact, protecting the healthy. It knows how to defend itself as any mind does. In this way, the forest behaves like an organism, aware of where it ends and where danger begins. If we could shrink ourselves down to the size of a grain of soil, the world beneath would look like a galaxy, glowing threads stretching in all directions, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of exchange. Some filaments shimmer with stored sugar, others vibrate with water or minerals on the move. The longer you observe, the more it resembles a kind of thought, slow, luminous, eternal. The mycelium mind has existed for nearly 1 billion years, long before animals walked the earth, before forests even existed. It learned to break down stone, to turn lifeless minerals into nourishment, to recycle decay into rebirth. It taught plants how to feed, and in return, plants taught fungi how to thrive in light. Every breath we take owes its existence to this partnership forged in the dawn of time, and yet we barely notice it. We step on it, we plow through it, we sever its threads with roads and walls. But it endures. Even a single surviving filament can regrow the network, spreading outward with quiet insistence. The forest's mind is resilient, forgiving, and infinite. Some researchers now believe that this communication might extend beyond nutrients, that trees can signal seasons, share defense strategies, even remember trauma. A sapling whose parent endured drought may grow differently, more cautiously, as though it inherits its ancestors' memory through the soil. This is not magic. It is biology at its most profound. Nature's way of keeping wisdom alive without a single spoken word. There are myths that speak of forests as conscious spirits, gods of root and leaf that listen to those who walk among them. But perhaps those old myths were simply early understandings of this truth, that life when connected deeply enough, begins to resemble awareness. The forest may not think like us, but it feels, it responds, it remembers. At night, when the air cools and the forest sleeps, the mycelium remains awake. Nutrients continue to flow. Signals ripple like invisible tides beneath the moonlit soil. A leaf may fall on one side of the forest, and hours later, the mycelium will carry its essence to another place, turning death into sustenance, ending into renewal. In this way, the forest dreams through the mycelium. It dreams of rain and light, of growth and decay, of the endless balance between giving and taking. The mycelium mind is not bound by the limits of the individual. It is the soul of the forest itself. And perhaps, if we quiet our own thoughts long enough, we might sense its presence, the faint awareness beneath the ground, ancient and kind. It asks for nothing yet gives everything. It waits for us to remember that we too were once part of this great intelligence. Breathe deeply. Listen to the silence beneath your feet. The earth is thinking. It always has been. Every morning when sunlight spills across the forest, something ancient and invisible begins again, a quiet exchange between earth and sky. The trees inhale what we exhale and exhale what we need to survive. They breathe us into being, and we breathe them in return. It is the oldest relationship on earth, one that happens without words, without thanks, yet binds every living thing in the rhythm of life. If you stand still long enough in a forest at dawn, you can almost feel it, the slow expansion of air, the invisible tide of oxygen rising as leaves unfurl to meet the sun. It's not a sound, but a feeling like the hush before music begins. Every leaf, every needle, every blade of moss joins in the quiet respiration of the planet. This is not mere biology. It's communion. Through photosynthesis, trees draw in carbon dioxide, water, and light, and weave them into sugar and air. In the process, they release oxygen, a single element that makes breath itself possible. Yet this act of giving is only half the story. Beneath the ground, in the dark veins of soil, trees continue to exchange gases, moisture, and life with the same grace. Even when night falls and photosynthesis sleeps, the breath of the forest continues in secret. When one tree breathes out, the molecules drift, unseen, until they find their way into lungs, perhaps of a fox, or a child, or even a faraway whale. The air does not belong to any single life form. It moves endlessly, carrying whispers of forests across oceans, deserts, and centuries. The air you breathe right now may have once passed through the heartwood of an ancient cedar. In this way, trees and humans are not just connected. They are extensions of each other's lungs. Yet the sharing is deeper still. Trees don't only exhale life, they share it. Scientists have found that trees can exchange carbon with their neighbors through the mycelium network beneath them. A tree in shade, starving for light, can be nourished by one that stands in sun. Sugars move like quiet gifts through the soil, passing from one organism to another. Even dying trees, by those nearing the end of their time, release their remaining energy into the network, feeding the living. Death, in the forest, is never wasted breath. There's a beauty in that quiet generosity. No announcement, no ceremony, just the constant flow of giving and receiving. The forest doesn't ask who deserves its air. It doesn't separate the good from the bad, the strong from the weak. It breathes for all without condition. And in doing so, it teaches the simplest truth, that existence itself is sustained by sharing. If you could slow time to a crawl, you'd see each molecule of carbon dioxide drawn in through the leaves, broken apart by sunlight, reshaped into sugar and oxygen, and released back to the wind. That same oxygen might drift upward, linger in the canopy, or join the breeze that wanders over mountains and oceans. It's a grand cycle, older than the continents, repeated countless times every second, and yet, perfectly effortless. We are taught that breathing is automatic, a reflex, something the body does without thought. But for trees, it is an act of devotion to the planet. Every breath a tree takes stabilizes the world. Every breath we take reminds us of the forests that stand unseen, purifying the chaos we create. When we cut a forest, it's not just wood we remove, it's the rhythm of the earth's lungs. Still, the trees remain patient. Even in the face of destruction, they continue to give. A single tree in a city, surrounded by stone and smoke, will still breathe for us. Quietly, faithfully, every day. It releases cool air into the heat, shade into glare, oxygen into exhaustion. It becomes a small sanctuary of balance in an unbalanced world. In tropical forests where the air feels alive, trees trade breath with such intensity that they can shape weather itself. As they exhale moisture, clouds form above them, drifting to feed rivers thousands of miles away. The forest's breath becomes rain, and the rain returns to feed the forest. It is a perfect circle of generosity, a system so vast that it defies our comprehension, and yet so delicate that one missing forest can change the fate of the sky. There is a quiet intelligence to this cycle. Each leaf seems to know when to open and when to rest. When drought comes, the forest slows its breath. When floods rise, roots draw deeper, holding firm. In this dance between air and life, nothing is wasted, not a single molecule, not a single moment. Perhaps that is what makes trees so peaceful to be around. Their breath slows ours. Their rhythm teaches us how to exist without haste. Under their shade, we begin to breathe the way the earth intended, long, deep, and without fear. Some ancient cultures believed that trees were living spirits, that to cut one down without ceremony was to silence a voice of the earth. They saw the forest's exhalation as sacred, the purest prayer ever spoken. And maybe they were right. For in every breath we take, the forest lives on. In every sigh of wind through leaves, life itself sings. When you breathe tonight, imagine the air entering your lung. Light from the sun, stored in a leaf, given freely by something older than time. You are not separate from the forest. You are part of its rhythm, a note in its endless breath. Close your eyes. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Somewhere, far away, a tree does the same. Together you share the same air, an ancient bond renewed with every inhale, kept alive with every exhale. The forest breathes, and through it so do you. The air between you is not empty. It is connection. It is memory. It is love written in molecules. Beneath the calm surface of the earth, far below the whispering leaves and the slow, drifting mist, lies a world built of memory. The roots stretch through the soil like veins through skin, coiling, reaching, listening. They move slowly, almost imperceptibly, but they never forget. Every droplet that ever touched them, every drought that ever tested them, every season of abundance and scarcity, all are stored within their silent network. The roots remember rain when the world above is parched and cracked. When the sky withholds its mercy, the roots still hold traces of water deep within them, a memory of generosity. They know where the moisture once gathered, where the streams once flowed, and they reach instinctively toward those remembered places. Their slow, deliberate movements are guided not just by the physics of growth, but by recollection written into their fibers. What they have known once they seek again. The soil beneath us is not dead matter. It is a living archive, alive with whispers of old storms and forgotten rivers. Within it, chemical signals travel like faint songs between roots, mycelium, and stones. A tree that once drank deeply from a stream that no longer exists might still send traces of that knowledge to others, guiding them toward hidden moisture or warning them of dryness ahead. This is not myth, it is science woven into poetry. In every living forest, trees are not individuals. They are collective memory embodied in green and brown. Roots store more than water. They store stories. When a young sapling rises beside its mother, their roots soon intertwine, sharing not just nutrients, but patterns of life. The way the mother once survived drought, the depth she once reached to find sustenance, the time when her own mother shaded her from the burning sun. Each generation inherits a map of survival, an invisible lineage of endurance. When the rains finally return, the roots are the first to hear them. Long before droplets touch the leaves, they feel the faint vibrations of approaching storms through the earth. Moisture moves downward like a whispered promise, and the roots respond with joy. They open their pores, ready to drink, ready to live again. The forest swells, the scent of petrichor rises, and the world breathes in relief. It's as if the trees had been holding their breath all along, waiting for the memory of rain to become real once more. Science tells us that trees can alter the way they grow based on their previous experiences with drought, that they can remember scarcity and adapt. Their roots dig deeper next time, preparing for what the sky may withhold. In their tissues, chemical imprints record stress like faint scars of memory. But there is tenderness in this resilience. Even when tested, they never lose faith in rain. They keep stretching, searching, believing in the return of water. If you could listen to the forest beneath your feet, you would hear a slow heartbeat, the movement of water through capillaries of wood, the gentle murmur of life circulating underground. Each drop of rain that falls onto the soil begins a journey that may last years. Some of it will be taken up immediately, some stored in pockets deep in the roots, and some will linger, waiting for the tree to call upon it during dry times. Rain, in the language of trees, is not fleeting. It is remembered like love. In the dry season, when the world above seems still, roots continue their patient work. They do not panic, for they have lived through silence before. They ration the water, feeding the youngest shoots first, keeping the sap flowing slowly but steadily. The forest might appear asleep, but it is merely conserving its pulse. It knows the pattern of the world. Every drought carries within it the echo of rain. Sometimes the rain that returns is the same rain that once left, carried in clouds, recycled through rivers and oceans, transformed by sun and wind. In this endless cycle, roots become the keepers of continuity. They do not grieve the dry days because they trust the return of water. To them, rain is never gone, only elsewhere. In human hearts, there are roots like this too. Parts of us that remember comfort even in loneliness, love even in absence, hope even in despair. We are not so different from the forest. Our memories of kindness sustain us through droughts of emotion. Just as roots hold water, we hold the remnants of warmth. And when the rain of life returns, a gentle word, a familiar scent, a tender moment, we bloom again just as the forest does. To stand barefoot in the forest after rain is to feel this connection. The ground is soft, breathing, alive. The air smells of rebirth, a mixture of earth and sky, root and rain, memory and renewal. The water that touched your skin may have once been drawn from the roots beneath your feet, centuries ago. It's a kind of immortality, a shared heartbeat between time and matter. As night falls, the forest grows quiet, but beneath that silence the roots continue their invisible work. They sip from underground pools, exchange nutrients, and store new memories of the day's storms. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, they will share what they've learned with every leaf, every bud, every whisper of green life above. Somewhere, deep below, an ancient root still holds the echo of the very first rain that ever fell upon this world. A molecule that has passed through countless forms. Ocean, cloud leaf, lung, the same drop that once touched a fern millions of years ago may now be resting inside a tree outside your window. The forest does not forget. The roots remember rain because the earth remembers life. And when you listen closely, when you let the hum of the soil rise through your feet, you might hear it too. The memory of water flowing through time, whispering that all things return. Beneath the quiet skin of the earth, where light never reaches and footsteps fade into silence, there exists an invisible web, a living network older than language, older than the wind. It connects every root, every leaf, every blade of grass. It is the mind of the forest, a system so vast and intricate that even our most advanced machines struggle to understand its intelligence. Yet it hums beneath our feet with steady purpose, moving in slow, patient thought. If you could see the soil with eyes tuned to life, you would witness rivers of communication glowing faintly through the dark. Fungal threads, called mycelium, stretch for miles like neural pathways, linking one tree to another in a conversation of nutrients and messages. Through this web, trees send sugars, warnings, and even distress calls. A wounded tree can signal its neighbors to prepare for danger. A mother tree can feed her seedlings through underground channels. The soil, once thought to be silent, is a living, whispering field, a slow pulse of information traveling from root to root. Scientists call this network the Wood Wide Web, a name that captures both its connectivity and mystery. It behaves almost like a brain, though it has no neurons, no central command. It is decentralized consciousness, intelligence woven through cooperation rather than control. When a forest is healthy, the web thrives, glowing with the chemical conversations of life. When it is wounded, the web mourns, slowing its exchange, retreating into dormancy until balance is restored. Every handful of soil is a galaxy of relationships, billions of microorganisms, threads of fungi, strands of root hair, and unseen channels where life and death meet and merge. Mycelium acts as messenger, courier, and caretaker. It helps one tree share excess nutrients with another in need, spreading strength through generosity. This quiet communion sustains the forest through fire, flood, and famine. It is not survival of the fittest here. It is survival through connection. What makes this even more extraordinary is how this network reacts to time. Mycelium doesn't only transport information, it learns. When a tree is attacked by insects, chemical warnings sent through the fungal web can alter the behavior of distant trees days before the insects reach them. The forest anticipates danger, prepares defenses, and remembers. Each exchange leaves an imprint, a memory of interaction. The next time the same threat returns, the forest responds faster, wiser. It's as if the trees themselves are thinking, not in the way we do, but in rhythms and chemicals, in the language of molecules and patience. There's beauty in this kind of thought. Thought without ego. The forest does not scheme or compete the way we do. Its intelligence is humble, shared, and selfless. It thrives by giving, by maintaining harmony, by ensuring that the weakest root still receives light through another's generosity. There is wisdom in this, an ancient natural wisdom that humanity often forgets. That true intelligence is connection, not isolation. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a forest at dusk. The air is heavy with the scent of pine and earth. Beneath you, the mycelial web glows faintly, invisible but alive. The trees around you are whispering, not in sound but in signals. They are talking about the rain that passed 2 days ago, about the fallen branch nearby that is slowly returning to the soil, about the deer that brushed against their bark. They exchange quiet gratitude for the shared breath of air, for the minerals that flow between them, for the light that nourishes them all. You cannot hear it, but you can feel it, a slow rhythm, a heartbeat of the living earth. The forest teaches us that thinking does not require a brain, that memory does not require words. Thought can exist in silence, in cooperation, in the unspoken bond between living things. In this web of green thought, every organism matters. The smallest moss, the tiniest mushroom, the ancient oak, all are nodes of the same consciousness, each contributing to the song of life that hums beneath the soil. When humans cut down trees or tear apart the land, they do not only destroy wood, they shatter communication, breaking the invisible lines that have carried messages for centuries. The forest goes quiet, like a mind losing parts of its memory. But life always finds a way to reconnect. Fungal filaments reach outward again, searching for companions, weaving new threads, rebuilding conversation. It may take decades, even centuries, but the forest never stops trying to speak again. Science calls it symbiosis. Poets might call it empathy. But perhaps it is something more, a biological form of love. The giving of nourishment without expectation, the sharing of warning without hesitation. This is what the forest teaches, not through words, but through being. In every root's embrace of another, there is the echo of an ancient truth, that to live well is to live connected. And maybe that is why humans feel peace among trees. Our nervous systems slow to match the rhythm of theirs. Our breath deepens, syncing with the air they exhale. Somewhere deep within us, we remember that we too are part of this web, that our thoughts, our dreams, our memories are not separate from the world around us. The forest does not end at the edge of its roots. It extends into us. As night falls, the invisible web glows with the slow activity of life. The roots send one last pulse of energy before resting. The mycelium hums faintly beneath the cool soil, its threads carrying silent goodnights between distant trees. The forest drifts into a collective slumber, dreaming perhaps of rain, of sunlight, of tomorrow. Somewhere beneath your feet, thought continues. A thought without words, without pride, without borders. The invisible web of green thought hums softly, the heartbeat of a planet that never stops thinking. In the still air of a midsummer forest, the scent of green fills the lungs, sharp, fresh, alive. But if you were to listen not with your ears, but with your breath, you would realize that this scent is not just fragrance. It is language. The air carries the whispers of leaves, molecules of meaning exchanged in silence. Every aroma, every invisible wisp rising from the canopy is a message of danger, of reassurance, of life itself continuing. When a caterpillar begins to chew on the leaf of an acacia, the tree reacts instantly. Within moments, it releases volatile compounds into the air, chemical warnings drifting toward nearby trees. Those neighbors, upon catching even a trace of the scent, prepare their own defenses, toughening their leaves and altering their chemistry before the insects arrive. The forest, in this way, becomes a community of mutual alertness. A single bite can send ripples through miles of woodland. What we perceive as a pleasant smell is, to the trees, a cry and an answer, an ancient call and response of survival. Scientists once believed that plants were passive, defenseless beings, slow, mute, unthinking. But the truth unfolding in laboratories and living forests reveals otherwise. Leaves release hundreds of different compounds into the air, each with its own purpose. Some attract pollinators. Some call in predators to eat the insects that harm them. Some simply warn their kin. The forest does not shout. It exhales. There is an elegance in this invisibility. No wires, no sound, no sight. Just molecules dancing in air, precise and purposeful. It is communication carried on the wind like letters written in fragrance. And every plant that catches these invisible messages interprets them with remarkable sensitivity. A wisp of methyl jasmonate, for instance, can tell a leaf it's time to prepare for attack. Another chemical might tell it the danger has passed. It's as though the forest is breathing together, in alarm, in relief, in collective thought. When the rain falls after a long dry spell, The air fills with a deep, earthy aroma known as petrichor, a scent made by oils released from soil and roots. To us, it smells like comfort, like life returning. But for plants, it's also a cue. The presence of certain compounds in the moist air tells seeds it's time to wake, roots to grow, leaves to open. Even the smell of water can be a language of renewal. Some plants, like sagebrush or poplars, have mastered this form of speech. A wounded sagebrush emits a blend of airborne signals that warns other plants nearby, including those of different species. The others respond, increasing their resistance and sometimes even producing similar scents, like a shared alarm system. Over time, these scents become the smell of resilience, of cooperation. To walk through a forest after insects have passed is to breathe the story of its survival. But scent is not only about danger, it is also about trust. Flowers release their perfumes not to warn but to invite, to build alliances with bees, moths, and birds. Each fragrance is a promise: come closer, help me live on, and you shall be rewarded. The air, thick with floral sweetness, becomes a network of quiet agreements between species. Even here, intention flows invisibly. The more we study this world of invisible communication, the clearer it becomes that the earth is alive with meaning. When a field of clover fills the air with its gentle sweetness, when pine forests exhale resin into the wind, when night-blooming jasmine perfumes the darkness, they are not just existing. They are expressing. The earth is thinking in the language of scent. There is something deeply human about this form of connection. We too remember through smell the scent of rain pulling forth childhood memories. A flower reminding us of someone we loved, the aroma of soil after a storm calming something ancient within us. The molecules that carry a tree's warning can also carry our emotions. In both plants and people, scent bypasses thought and travels straight to memory. It does not ask permission to be felt. It simply arrives carrying stories we didn't know we'd kept. Imagine standing alone in a forest after a summer rain. The scent around you shifts. A blend of damp bark, moss, and green life-breathing relief. You are inhaling communication billions of years old. The trees have spoken, the roots have answered, and the air is filled with their language. Every breath you take is a translation of trust, the forest giving itself to you molecule by molecule. When danger fades, plants release calmer signals, subtle markers of balance. These tell others that the threat has passed, that growth can resume. The scent changes from sharp to gentle, from defense to rest. The forest exhales peace. It's a rhythm as old as the wind itself. The pulse of fear and calm, of alarm and safety, carried invisibly through the living air. In a way, we are part of this exchange. Our lungs breathe in the same compounds trees exhale, and we return to them the carbon they crave. Every inhale and exhale between human and tree is a form of wordless trust, the most intimate dialogue on earth. You breathe the language of leaves every moment of your life. Though you may not realize it, there is comfort in this knowing. When we walk among trees, we are surrounded not by silence but by unending conversation. The forest speaks in scent, and our bodies understand it instinctively. The smell of pine slows the heart. The aroma of soil soothes the mind. The sweetness of blooming flowers releases the same calm the forest feels when it thrives. We have evolved listening to these messages. Our peace is rooted in their voice. As the sun sets and the wind quiets, the forest exhales one final time. The scents of day, resin, sap, wild herbs, drift upward, mixing with the cooling air. Above, stars awaken, and below, leaves settle into stillness. The conversation softens, fading into the slow rhythm of night. What began as warning ends as trust. The forest, once alert, now breathes in harmony again. Safe, alive, dreaming in fragrance. And somewhere in that unseen air, every molecule carries a single truth. To live is to communicate and to trust the world enough to be understood. Night descends gently upon the forest. The last traces of sunlight linger on the edges of the tallest leaves, glinting softly before fading into cool shadow. A deep calm spreads, not the emptiness of stillness, but the fullness of rest. For while the forest appears to sleep, it does not truly fall silent. Within every leaf, within every cell of green, a quiet miracle continues. The slow dreaming of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll, the pigment that paints the world in shades of life, does more than capture light. It remembers it. Even after the sun has gone, the leaves hum with the faint afterglow of energy stored from the day. In that faint, invisible rhythm, they breathe, mend, and dream. If the forest could dream in color, its thoughts would be the deep green of this molecule, patient, eternal, filled with memory. Each leaf is a library of sunlight. Throughout the day, it absorbs light photons, tiny messengers from the sun that have traveled across 93 million miles. Inside the leaf cells, these photons ignite a chain of events so intricate and harmonious it feels almost like choreography. Water from the roots, carbon from the air, and sunlight from the heavens, together they weave the substance of life. This is photosynthesis, the oldest and quietest spell of creation. But when night falls and photosynthesis pauses, something more subtle begins. The forest enters a state of reflection. Sugars formed in daylight are now shared, carried through stems and roots, sent outward to the farthest tips and downward to the hidden soil. It is as if the forest is redistributing its dreams, letting every part of itself feel the memory of light. Trees feed their roots. Roots feed the fungi. Fungi feed the soil. The circle of energy continues even in darkness. Nothing is wasted. If you could listen to the world at this hour, beneath the silence, you might hear a slow pulse, the steady transfer of life from leaf to earth. The trees are whispering their daytime memories to the night, exhaling the warmth of what they once absorbed. In this way, the forest dreams together, its collective breath keeping the ecosystem alive. There is a gentleness to the green mind of the world. Chlorophyll does not fight or rush. It waits, it absorbs, it gives. It transforms light into nourishment with no noise, no smoke, no waste. The entire planet depends on its patience. Every forest, every field, every breath of oxygen we take, all are gifts from this quiet pigment. It is the alchemist of life, turning sunlight into sustenance, radiance into resilience. And though it is color, it behaves almost like consciousness. Scientists studying plant biochemistry have found that photosynthesis operates with near-perfect efficiency, guided by processes that border on quantum precision. Light energy moves through chlorophyll molecules in ways that resemble decision-making, choosing the most efficient path, adapting instantly to changing conditions. The forest may not think as we do, but in its green depths there is intelligence, calm, deliberate, unspoken. By night, this intelligence rests. Starch and sugar move through the veins of trees, feeding unseen networks. The forest breathes slower. Stomata are the tiny mouths on leaves, close to conserve water, yet some remain open, as if listening. The air cools and moisture settles like thought. In this coolness, the leaves repair themselves. Microscopic wounds are mended. Molecules realign. The cells that hold chlorophyll reorganize, preparing for dawn. The forest dreams of light returning. Dreams, perhaps, are not exclusive to animals. Maybe a plant's dream is simply a continuation of its work, a meditation in the dark. When humans sleep, we replay fragments of memory and feeling. When trees sleep, they replay cycles of energy, sunlight remembered, water recalled, the faint echo of warmth stored deep within. Both are acts of healing. Both are ways of continuing life in stillness. Somewhere in the canopy, dew begins to form, tiny drops gathering on the edges of leaves. Each droplet reflects the pale light of the moon, turning the forest into a field of dimly glowing jewels. Beneath each drop, chlorophyll molecules rest beneath the surface, suspended in green silence. It feels as though the forest is breathing in the moonlight, storing its silver glow beside the gold of the sun. There is an unspoken kinship between chlorophyll and us. Just as the leaf drinks in light, we drink in moments. The warmth of memory, the glow of kindness, the quiet radiance of love, these two become our nourishment. We too photosynthesize in our own way, transforming experiences into meaning. And like the forest, we rest not in emptiness, but in continuation. Night does not end the work of life, it deepens it. If you were to wander through the forest now, you would see the silhouettes of leaves outlined against the starlit sky. You might hear the faintest trickle of water beneath the roots. You might feel the hush of the air, heavy with unseen energy. Every green surface is alive, not in wakefulness, but in peace. Chlorophyll holds its breath, dreaming softly, waiting for the first warmth of dawn. When morning comes, those dreams will awaken. The first rays of sunlight will strike the leaves, and the cycle will begin anew. The molecules will stir, catching light again, as if it were a memory reborn. Photosynthesis will resume, silent and precise, giving back to the world everything it gathered overnight. And yet, something of the night will remain within the leaf, a trace of their dreams, a softness that makes morning light feel sacred. Every breath of oxygen released that day will carry within it a fragment of last night's stillness, a piece of the forest's quiet sleep. You will breathe it in without realizing, and perhaps, in that invisible exchange, you too will carry part of the forest's dream. Because in truth, we are all written in chlorophyll, our lives sustained by the green thoughts of trees, our rest intertwined with theirs. The forest does not merely exist beside us. It dreams with us, breathes with us, and remembers the light so we never forget to seek it. Dawn spills softly across the earth, and with it the garden awakens. Dew glistens like scattered glass beads across petals and leaves. A slow exhale rises from the soil, mist, breath, memory. The air carries a faint perfume, a mixture of earth and promise. Yet this place, though filled with quiet motion, is not merely alive. It listens. Every stem, every blade, every root beneath the surface is attuned to the world's murmurs. If you stand here long enough, without words, you might feel it, the subtle exchange between all living things. The garden is a listener of vibrations, of scents, of patterns too small for the eye. The rustle of leaves carries meaning. The hum of insects becomes dialogue. The tilt of a flower toward a sound or a shadow is its way of replying. This is no static world of green stillness. It is a realm of slow, intricate communication. When scientists began studying the behavior of plants, they found something extraordinary. Leaves trembled in response not just to touch, but to sound. Certain frequencies could make them grow faster, open their pores, or bend toward the source. It was as though they could hear, not in the way we do, with ears and echoes, but through the vibration of life itself. The membranes of their cells trembled to rhythm, detecting the smallest quivers in the air. In the garden, this listening never stops. A bee's buzz becomes a message that nectar is near. The rustle of nearby stems signals the passage of a creature. Even the sound of raindrops tapping the soil is registered, a signal that water is returning, that the long thirst will end. The plants lean subtly, adjusting, responding. The world speaks and the garden answers, not with words, but with movement, color, and growth. Scientists have observed that plants respond differently depending on the kind of sound they hear. Classical music, gentle vibrations, the rhythm of wind, these can stimulate growth. Harsh noise or constant mechanical hum, on the other hand, can stunt it. To the plants, everything is vibration, and vibration is meaning. They are translators of the invisible symphony that fills the air. Perhaps this is why a garden feels so alive, even when it's quiet. There's an awareness in its stillness. The flowers facing the sun, the grass swaying with wind, the slow spiral of a fern uncurling, all of it is a language of attention. Every living thing here leans toward harmony, toward balance. Beneath the surface, roots extend their own sense of hearing. Through the soil, they detect the soft footsteps of worms, the gentle rain of nutrients, the slow trickle of water finding its path. They listen through touch, through chemical whispers. The hum of the earth itself becomes their song, the deep and steady vibration of existence. It's humbling to realize that this listening world existed long before us. The first forests may have responded to thunder, to footsteps of ancient animals, to the low drone of early winds. Over time, they learned to translate these sounds into survival, to close their pores before storms, to release scents when danger approaches, to time their blooming with the rhythm of the world. Life was never deaf. It was always listening. If we walk quietly through a garden, perhaps it listens to us too. Our breath, our heartbeat, the sound of our footsteps against the soil, all are vibrations that pass into the ground, into roots and leaves. The plants do not judge or fear, they simply receive. The garden feels your presence, measures the rhythm of your movement, and folds it into its awareness like another verse in the ongoing song of life. There's a strange comfort in that, to know that something ancient and green listens without expectation. It hears not your words but your energy. When you are calm, your stillness resonates in the same frequency as the world around you. When you are anxious, the garden absorbs it quietly, softening it in the vast hush of its patience. The plants remind us how to listen, not just with our ears, but with our entire being. In some cultures, people speak to their gardens, not as superstition, but as an act of respect. They believe plants respond to the kindness of tone, to the rhythm of care in a voice. And perhaps they do. Every molecule of air that touches a leaf carries the vibration of speech. When words are soft, they become part of the wind, settling like gentle echoes among petals. A tender word might not make a plant bloom faster, but it joins the song of the garden, a quiet participation in its living pulse. There's also a science to kindness. Researchers found that plants touched roughly or handled with haste produce stress hormones, the same chemical alarm they release when attacked by insects. But when handled gently, they remain calm, their internal chemistry steady and unafraid. It seems that even without nerves, they know the difference between harm and care. The garden listens not only to the air, but to intention. Every dawn, the garden begins anew, opening petals like ears, stretching stems toward distant sounds. The bees will return, the wind will speak, and deep beneath the roots will continue their subterranean dialogue. When rain comes, it will fall like applause, and the garden will absorb its rhythm, rejoicing in the melody of renewal. If you close your eyes here, you can almost feel what the plants feel, the vibration of a world alive, layered and infinite. The rumble of distant thunder echoes through the soil. The song of a bird travels through the branches, down to the roots, into the earth. Even the silence between sounds is alive, a resting note in a symphony that never ends. To live as the garden lives is to listen without needing to respond, to sense without grasping, to trust the music of existence. It is to find stillness not in absence but in awareness, a kind of peace that vibrates gently through everything. when night returns, the garden will listen differently. The sounds will soften. A moth's flutter, the low hum of the earth cooling, the faint drip of dew forming again. And in that hush, the garden will rest, listening to dreams instead of daylight. It will hold everything it has heard, footsteps, whispers, wind, and silence, and turn them slowly into growth. Because that is what life does when it listens well. It grows quietly, in rhythm with the world, transforming sound into being and stillness into strength. Night settles over the forest like a slow breath, and in its darkness, memory stirs. The trees stand still, their trunks glistening faintly with dew, but beneath the quiet surface of bark and soil, something ancient hums. Every gust of wind that has ever passed, every drop of rain that ever fell, every footprint pressed into the earth, all of it remains here, recorded in the living memory of the forest. Each leaf carries traces of past seasons, the shape of its edges, the texture of its veins, the rhythm of its unfurling. They are all written by the weather it has known. When the sun burned too long, the leaf remembered. When the frost whispered too soon, it remembered that too. And as it falls to the ground, the soil absorbs its story, folding it into the silent archive beneath the roots. The forest never forgets. Scientists have found that plants carry biological memory in more ways than we imagined. Trees can remember drought, hunger, and cold. Through molecular signals, they mark their cells with reminders of what once happened, a system of memory that isn't bound by brains or neurons, but by chemistry and rhythm. When drought returns, the trees respond faster, wiser. Their pores close in anticipation, their roots deepen in preparation. It's as though the forest has learned and will not be caught unguarded again. Every root beneath the soil acts as a conduit for recollection. Fungal networks, the hidden veins of the earth, store the memories of nutrients, rainfall, and decay. Through this mycelial web, one tree can share its experiences with another. When danger comes, the memory moves from elder to sapling, from oak to fern, as if wisdom itself were being passed through the soil. A forest is not just a gathering of individuals. It is an organism that remembers itself across centuries. In the far reaches of the Amazon, scientists once observed mother trees feeding their young long after their own strength began to wane. Even as they died, they channeled nutrients toward the next generation, ensuring their continuation. That act, silent, unseen, is a form of remembrance. The forest holds on to love the way it holds on to rain, letting it sink, flow, and return in cycles of renewal. When lightning strikes a tree, its memory is scarred into the wood. Rings darken around the wound, marking the moment the sky touched the earth. Those rings become a timeline, a visible story written in silence. Through dendrochronology, scientists can read centuries of memory etched into a single trunk. The tree keeps everything: years of abundance, years of drought, the laughter of rivers, the grief of fire. And when it falls, the forest doesn't lose the memory. It disperses it. Through soil, through seeds, through every echo of decay that feeds what's to come. There is a spiritual dimension to this that even science seems to pause before. Indigenous cultures around the world have always spoken of trees as elders, keepers of memory. To them, forests are living libraries, repositories of wisdom carried not in words, but in presence. When one sits beneath an ancient oak or cedar, one feels something timeless, as though the air itself holds stories older than language. The rustle of leaves is more than a sound. It's an echo of remembrance, a conversation between time and matter. Even human emotion seems to linger here. When we walk through a forest, the rhythm of our heartbeat subtly synchronizes with the sway of the trees. Our stress lowers, our breath deepens. It's as if the forest recognizes us all. not as intruders, but as something it has seen before. Perhaps, in a way, it remembers the first humans who touched its bark, who gathered beneath its shade, who spoke to it in gratitude and fear. The molecules of their breath still drift through this air. The forest has inhaled us for millennia, and we, in turn, have breathed it back. Memory in nature isn't linear like ours. It doesn't archive events. It absorbs them. When rain falls on the same soil for 1,000 years, the minerals beneath change. When fire burns through a valley, the seeds that sprout afterward remember the ash. They need it, crave it, depend on it. The new life that rises from the ruin carries the imprint of the old. This is how the forest heals, not by forgetting, but by transforming what was into what will be. There's a quiet lesson in that. Humans often try to forget pain, to bury what hurts and move on. But the forest doesn't resist memory. It holds it, softens it, and turns it into nourishment. Every fallen leaf feeds something. Every death enriches the living. To remember for the forest is to remain whole. Sometimes at dusk, if you stand in a clearing and listen closely, you can sense the weight of that memory pressing gently around you. The air feels thick, textured with age. You might not hear voices, but you'll feel them. The pulse of generations humming beneath your feet. The trees creak not just from wind, but from the long strain of time stretching through their fibers. The soil breathes with 1,000,000 decomposed lives that once swayed in this same wind. Even decay is remembrance here. Moss grows over fallen logs like a soft shroud, preserving the contours of what once stood tall. Fungi rise from the dead wood, rewriting the story of death into nourishment. The forest's memory is not still. It is constantly in motion, whispering between roots and rain. At night, when the moonlight threads through the canopy, everything shimmers in a faint silver glow. The forest seems to exhale a sigh of recollection. The air is filled with the scent of sap and shadow, of things both living and gone. And as you stand there, surrounded by a silence that hums, you realize nothing in nature truly disappears. Every vibration, every touch, every molecule remains part of the whole. The forest does not mourn what it loses because loss is merely another kind of transformation. When morning comes, the light will filter gently through the leaves again, illuminating 1,000 quiet memories stored in each droplet of dew. The forest will wake, just as it always does, carrying the weight of everything that has ever been, yet moving forward as if each moment were new. To remember like a forest is to live in peace with time. It is to let everything belong, the joy, the storm, the silence, the return. And as the day unfolds, you might find yourself breathing slower, thinking softer, realizing that perhaps memory, when held with love, is not a burden, but a root. One that keeps us connected to all that has ever lived. If you listen long enough, you begin to hear it, the world breathing beneath you. Not the kind of sound that reaches the ear, but one that settles inside the chest, deep and slow. The earth is not silent. It hums in frequencies so low, so patient, that most creatures move through life unaware of it. Yet everything that grows, every leaf, every root, every grain of soil is part of this endless conversation. There is language in the trembling of roots, in the shift of minerals, in the pulse of water threading through the dark. From mountain top to ocean floor, signals drift invisibly, forming the slowest dialogue in existence. Rocks dissolve into soil, soil feeds the roots exhale into the air, and the air returns in rain. It is a circle without a beginning, an eternal exchange where life and death are not opposites, but syllables of the same word. When scientists record the planet's vibrations, the soft, seismic murmurs of wind, tide and shifting crust, they find patterns that sound almost alive. These waves ripple through the earth like a heartbeat, resonating with every tree and mountain. To live here is to move within this pulse, to belong to it, even if we cannot consciously hear it. The trees are fluent in this language. Their roots sense the faintest changes in moisture and minerals. Through the underground networks of fungi, these signals are carried, translated, shared. When drought creeps in from a distance, the forest knows before the surface does. Messages pass silently beneath fallen leaves, instructions, warnings, care. The ground beneath your feet is not still. It is speaking. It always has been. What we call communication is just one small branch of a far older system. Long before words were invented, the earth was already speaking to itself. Wind sculpted dunes, rivers carved canyons, and seeds learned to follow the whisper of sunlight. Life emerged not from chaos, but from the slow rhythm of response, the universe learning, moment by moment, to listen to itself. When rain falls on a forest, it does more than quench. It carries memories. In each drop are fragments of air and dust from faraway places, traces of ocean salt, volcanic ash, even human breath. As the droplets seep into the ground, they deliver news from distant lands, feeding the soil not only with water, but with story. The roots receive these offerings and pass them onward, weaving them into the quiet intelligence of the land. In this way, every place is connected to every other. A forest in one hemisphere might contain the memory of another's rainfall. The scent of the sea may linger in mountain moss. Nothing is isolated. Everything is part of one continuous conversation, conducted in molecules and vibration. Even the rocks participate. They are not dead things, but slow listeners. Over centuries, they shift and respond to the weight of water, the heat of the sun, the pull of gravity. Their silence is not absence, but endurance. When a tree sends its roots into a crack of stone, it isn't just seeking support. It is initiating dialogue, feeling the mineral beneath, learning how deep it can go. Over time, that root will change the stone, and the stone will change the root. They become part of one another's story. Humans rarely hear this. Our pace is too fast, our senses tuned to smaller, louder rhythms. But sometimes when the world grows quiet, when wind moves through the branches and no voice interrupts it, we can almost sense the larger pulse that holds everything together. It hums through the soles of the feet, through the chest, through the space between each heartbeat. For a brief moment, you feel that you belong to something immeasurably vast, and that it in turn knows you exist. Science calls this interconnectedness the biosphere. Poets call it the soul of the earth. Both are right. It is the same phenomenon seen through two languages, one analytical, one emotional. The exchange between soil, plant, air, and water forms a dialogue more perfect than any human invention. It's not just that the planet sustains life, it is life speaking to itself through countless forms. In forests, this quiet communication keeps the balance. When one part weakens, another compensates. When nutrients dwindle, older trees release what they've stored. The forest heals itself through listening, a practice we humans once understood but have forgotten. Our ancestors read the signs in wind and stars, knew how to feel the shift of weather in the bones of the earth. They moved in rhythm with it. Now in cities built of concrete, the old voice of the planet grows faint, but it has never stopped speaking. Sometimes earthquakes are not destruction, but expression. The deep voice of the planet shifting its weight. Volcanic eruptions, too, are a kind of exhale, releasing what has built up within. Even the magnetic fields that ripple from pole to pole are forms of communication, signals between core and sky. The same patterns that shape the orbits of planets also hum through the movement of roots. The conversation of Earth and cosmos is seamless, the language of energy, gravity, and time. To realize this is to awaken a deeper sense of belonging, We are not outside this conversation. We are one of its participants. The air we exhale becomes the breath of leaves. The dust beneath our feet once flowed through the bloodstream of stars. Every heartbeat is a reply to the same rhythm that moves the tides. When we listen to the world, it listens back, not with words, but with presence. As night falls, the forest settles once more into its slow dialogue. The insects hum softly. The wind stirs the branches with a sigh. Somewhere in the darkness, a root trembles, sending its quiet signal outward. Another root answers. Beneath them, the earth hums its endless tone, low, constant, ancient. If you close your eyes, you might feel that hum align with your breath. You inhale and the forest inhales with you. You exhale and it replies. You are no longer separate. You are part of the earth's quiet conversation, a whisper in its infinite voice. And though you cannot translate it, you understand it. Deep down, every living thing does. It is the language of being alive. Before there were words, there were rhythms. Before there were thoughts, there were patterns. Long before any creature spoke, the universe had already learned to communicate. Through light, through vibration, through motion. Every star, every drop of water, every atom in existence carried within it a tendency to respond, to echo, to reach out. This was the first language, the silent one, spoken not with sound but with change. When the first cells emerged from the oceans, they carried that language forward. They responded to warmth, to light, to chemical signals drifting through the currents. A pulse of heat meant energy. A faint shadow meant danger. Slowly, the primitive cells began to coordinate, to move in rhythm with one another. When one pulsed, another followed, and thus the conversation of life began. Billions of years later, that same silent communication still shapes everything alive. Inside your body, trillions of cells speak to each other in chemical whispers. They do not use words, but the messages are clear: grow, repair, protect, rest. Hormones travel through the bloodstream like letters carried by invisible hands. Neurons flash like stars, sending electric thoughts through the dark corridors of the mind. To think is simply to translate this ancient dialogue into meaning. Every emotion, every memory, every dream, it's all part of the same conversation that began when life first learned to respond to its surroundings. You are not inventing thought. You are participating in an unbroken chain of awareness that has existed since the dawn of time. Scientists call this network of signals the language of life. Every living being, from a single bacterium to a whale, uses it. Plants exchange information through chemical signals in the air and underground. Fungi send nutrient messages through their mycelial webs. Even viruses, in their own strange way, communicate, reading the genetic code of the cells they invade and altering it like editors rewriting a story. Life is not just surviving, it is talking to itself. The earliest language may have been vibration, a molecule trembling in reaction to heat or light. Then, as life grew more complex, vibration turned into impulse, impulse into rhythm, rhythm into behavior. The cells learned to recognize patterns. They learned to remember. This was the beginning of intelligence, not in the brain, but in the ability to notice, to adapt, to respond. Imagine a coral reef glowing softly beneath the moonlit water. Each coral is alive, responding to subtle cues in the tide and temperature. When the conditions are right, the entire reef releases its eggs and sperm in perfect unison. Thousands of creatures separated by space but synchronized by instinct. This is not chaos. It is communication on a scale too vast for human language to capture. The ocean itself becomes a sentence, spoken once a year, perfectly timed. Later, when animals emerged from the sea, communication evolved into sound. A whale's song, deep and mournful, can travel hundreds of miles underwater. a conversation stretched across the horizon. Birds learned to shape air into melody. Wolves learned to call across valleys. The first human, somewhere among them, must have listened and felt the same longing. To be heard, to send meaning beyond the limits of the body. The first human words were likely not names or commands, but feelings, cries of wonder, warning, gratitude, grief, a sound made not to describe, but to connect. Over time, those sounds became more precise, but even now the oldest words in any language, mother, water, fire, sky, carry echoes of that primal yearning. They remind us that speech began as a way to belong to one another, to not be alone. Yet the truest language has never been sound. It is the stillness between them, the unspoken understanding that passes between two beings, a mother and her newborn, two wolves beneath a pale moon, the hush before a storm. Even silence has syntax. The earth does not need to speak aloud. Its meaning is carried in vibration, in gravity, in rhythm. Modern science has begun to rediscover this truth. Researchers have found that trees emit ultrasonic clicks when thirsty, invisible to the human ear. Bees dance to tell one another where to find flowers. The cells in our own bodies pulse in rhythmic harmony. A biological orchestra that keeps us alive. Beneath the chaos of life there is order, communication, coherence. Everything alive is both message and messenger. And what of consciousness? That mysterious awareness that allows us to reflect on existence. Perhaps it too is a kind of conversation audio, the universe speaking to itself through living matter. When you wonder about the stars, it may not be you alone who wonders. It might be the cosmos remembering itself, whispering across time, I am still here. I am still alive. In that sense, thought is sacred. Every idea, every question, every act of creation is a continuation of the universe's first whisper. The atoms that once drifted in starlight now think, feel, and dream within you. Your mind is not separate from the cosmos. It is the cosmos becoming aware of its own story. Language, spoken, written, sung, or felt, is how we keep that story alive. It bridges the gap between the seen and unseen, between solitude and unity. Every time you speak with honesty, every time you listen deeply, you are honoring that ancient rhythm. You are participating in the great dialogue of existence. And perhaps when all words are finally gone, when the last breath leaves the body and silence returns, the conversation doesn't end. It simply shifts into another form. Vibration without sound, light without body, presence without name. The universe continues to speak endlessly, patiently, waiting for another ear to listen, another mind to awaken. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine this, your breath joining the rhythm of all things. The tide, the stars, the quiet pulse of the planet beneath your bed. You are part of the oldest conversation there is. One that began before language and will outlast every word. Life learned to speak, and in doing so it learned to listen.